Just so classy.
Your transitions have transformed from actual attempts at transitions to just saying
Red alert.
Very nice. Very well done.
I will do as I please. For I am the one in the power.
Yeah, you can tell yourself that.
So,
This
week's Rant of the Week is about lying about abortion to push a politicized message. Stacey Abrams says there's no such thing as a 6-week fetal heartbeat. Manufactured sound. When I was looking this up, there was actually an article from Jezebel saying that she was speaking truth to power. And I'm like,
of course.
Nope. Abrams claimed manufactured heartbeat sound is an attempt by men to control women's bodies.
Yeah, so like, I'm going to go out on a limb and imagine okay, so she's implying that somebody who created these ultrasound machines, recorded a fake, heartbeat and plugged it into the system so that you hear the fake heartbeat, just in a grand bid, a massive conspiracy to fool millions of women into thinking that there's a heartbeat. It's they're dastardly, those Republicans.
Yeah, those Republicans.
That's right.
So from Abrams, there's no such thing as a heartbeat at 6 weeks. Abrams, who is running against incumbent Republican Governor Brian Kemp.
No such thing!
Okay. It's a manufactured sound to convince people that men have the right to take control of a woman's body. Was that shrill enough for you?
No, you got to do more like Steven Crowder. It's a manufactured sound! The sound to convince people!
Oh, so I have to make it shrill and black.
Yeah, that's right. Well, she's black,
Oh, that's true. That's true. Abrams seems to be referring to Georgia's pro-life law passed after the overturning of Roe v. Wade this year. Mm-hmm. The Georgia legislation known as the Living Infants Fairness and Equality, or Heartbeat Bill, bans abortion after a fetal heartbeat is detected, sometimes as early as 6 weeks. The Georgia law includes exceptions for rape and incest, as long as the police report is filed. It allows for later abortions when the mother's life is at risk or a serious medical condition renders the fetus unviable. The law passed in 2019, but a federal judge ruled it unconstitutional and blocked it. The Federal Appeals Court overturned the lower court's ruling, allowing the law to take effect on July 20th.
That's directly as a result of Dobbs, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So apparently she was pro-life until the age of 30, until she began considering a run for office.
Oh.
Dang.
Well, she went Democrat, so you kind of have to be pro-abortion.
So this is the speech in which she said it.
There is no such thing as a heartbeat at 6 weeks. It is a manufactured sound designed to convince people that men have the right to take control of a woman's body away from her.
There is no such thing. There you go.
Oh, you crazy! There's no such thing. It's
they're going to try and take away your bodies, girl.
You're tripping, boy. You're tripping.
You're tripping. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was, of course, a complete lie. Now, normally with an ultrasound, you're not going to see much at a 6-week ultrasound. They don't book them. 6 weeks is mostly the time in which you get the pregnancy test and discover that you're pregnant.
Wait, what is the age of gestation that most women find out they're pregnant? Isn't it
4 to 6 weeks?
Yeah, so even at 6 weeks, they're barely finding out.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that they're already pregnant.
Well, 6 to 8 weeks. 6 to 8 weeks. The child is about the size as a pea to a kidney bean. They're really small. Mm-hmm. So you're not going to see much on an ultrasound, and you're not going to hear a heartbeat unless you actually have really advanced technology. But an ultrasound is not going to really determine. It's going to be really hard to detect a heartbeat at 6 weeks. Now, of course, at 10 weeks, you can hear a heartbeat. I've heard that heartbeat at 10 weeks. It's not a manufactured sound.
No.
Because it's not a manufactured sound that when you move it in one direction, literally you'd have to have the ultrasound oh, okay, I got this button, and the button is going to turn on the heartbeat sound. And then I have to be really on top of turning that heartbeat sound on exactly when I'm in the right spot. Mm-hmm. Man, Stacey Abrams, you conspiratorial nut.
Now, here's the question. Okay, so obviously everything, Democrats have no problem lying in order to get what they want. So I've no doubt that she would be willing to lie about this, early on. But here's the question: I have heard that a baby's like heartbeat can be detected up to 8 weeks. At 8 weeks, because I remember like doing some research on the Texas law, and I'm like, okay, 8 weeks seems to be like the more commonly accepted like time when you're probably going to see a heartbeat. Seeming like the range of like feel a baby feeling pain. I've heard as young as like 12 to 14 weeks that they can feel pain, maybe even younger. But like like obviously later on you definitely feel it. So do you think like how likely is it that a baby can have a detectable heartbeat at 6 weeks? Is that more of a rarity or is that like the norm?
Well,
from what you want?
Like in order to detect a heartbeat that early, you'd actually have to do fairly invasive stuff. Like the reason that they've said that they're detecting a heartbeat, from what I remember, it's actually based on studies and reports on the embryos of other species. And it's like, okay, well, in this species, their embryonic development is somewhat similar to humans. And so their embryonic development, you can detect a heartbeat in utero with advanced tech at 6 weeks. And so that's what they're basing that on, because it would be, of course, morally unethical to go in and say, I'm going to detect the fetal heartbeat now, because it's going to significantly disturb the development of that child. And then, of course, later on, you can have fairly advanced ultrasound imaging technology. But that early on, you're not going to actually... It's mostly based on an assumption and a hypothesis, because you'd have to grow a child in a lab to really determine this.
Yeah, so it seems like she's making a big deal about a kind of a... What do you call it? She's making the conversation about 6 weeks as a way of like trying to be like, you see, the pro-lifers or these pro-life people are not even like they're not scientific or something like that, right?
Yep.
Because I mean, let's face it, if you go into an abortion clinic hoping to get an abortion in a state like this, they're going to do a regular ultrasound, right? Which means if a heartbeat cannot be detected on 6 weeks on a regular ultrasound, then they're just going to go ahead and do it anyways. So I don't know. Like I think that there's some truth and some like mistruths going on here. On the one hand, yeah, it's very rare that you're going to see like a heartbeat at 6 weeks. I could be wrong, but I mean, from what I've heard, that seems very early.
It is.
But when she's saying that it's like fake and it's like not even like a heartbeat and all that, I'm like, well, I don't know if that's true. Now there's whether or not that's a heartbeat.
Well, she's essentially saying that like early heartbeat detection is manufactured. And I'm like, no.
No, like it's faked.
Yeah, it's entirely faked. And I'm like, no, it's not. That's not faked. But saying that it's faked at 6 weeks, and it's like, well, you're saying it's fake at 6 weeks because nobody's going to go in and do tests at 6 weeks.
Yeah. I think it's more of an academic question than an actual practical, pragmatic question.
It's more, well, it's entirely meant to mislead.
Yeah.
So she's like, well, if you hear something at 6 weeks, then that's manufactured. And it's like, well, nobody's going to be testing at 6 weeks. And then, of course, the assumption is, oh, yes, well, it's all manufactured. And it's like,
I think that's what's
that's
going
what
on
she's
here.
intending to try. That's the idea that she's intending to try and mislead people with.
It sounds very similar to the idea of when people bring up like oh, you're gonna get like charged criminally for having a miscarriage, and like they try to use these these very odd tactics, like obviously dishonest, but so it sounds like a dishonest tactic to try to like claim that like, oh, you're gonna go in for a 6-week abortion and they're gonna find some totally like made up sound and tell you like, oh, you can't get an abortion anymore. It's part of it is fear mongering. She's trying to get it to people's head the idea that, oh my goodness, you could go into like an abortion clinic at 6 weeks and they're not going to let you have an abortion because they're making up these fake heartbeat sounds. It's like a conspiracy thing, right? Like, so they rely on people being fairly poorly informed and trusting that these people, like, Stacey Abrams and other officials, people
are being honest and upfront and truthful.
But like we covered last week, people who have a reputation and a tendency to lie and never ever change their tactics can't be trusted. So you can't really trust what Stacey Abrams.
Well, and of course, those on the pro-abortion side, like Stacey Abrams and like Chrissy Teigen, will try and manufacture things to try and push their agenda. So Chrissy Teigen says that she has come to realize she had an abortion, not a miscarriage. So she's spoken about how she has come to realize the loss of her baby during pregnancy 2 years ago was an abortion rather than a miscarriage. The model revealed in 2020 that she had lost the baby at 20 weeks as a result of pregnancy complication. At the time, the loss was described as a miscarriage, and she shared emotional photos from her hospital bedside. She now says that she had to make difficult and heartbreaking decisions after learning the child would not survive. It became very clear around halfway that he would not survive and that I wouldn't either without any medical intervention. She said she had only recently come to accept the procedure as an abortion to save my life for a baby that had absolutely no chance. She's married to singer, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. So I told the world, quote, that we had a miscarriage. The world agreed we had a miscarriage, and all the headlines said it was a miscarriage. At first, I became really frustrated that I didn't in the first place say what it was, and then I felt silly that it had taken me over a year to actually understand that we had had an abortion. The couple had already named the unborn child Jack. 2 years ago, when I was pregnant with Jack, John and my third child, I had to make a lot of difficult and heartbreaking decisions. She told the session about having a miscarriage before stopping herself and saying, let's call it what it was. It was an abortion to save my life. So several weeks. This is basically what happened. She had been induced to deliver Jack at 20 weeks after being diagnosed with a partial placental abruption. Placental abruption is when the placenta starts to come away from the inside of the womb wall. She recounted how her bleeding had become heavier, and she went into the hospital where doctors tried bags and bags of blood and transfusions, but they had no effect. After a couple nights in the hospital, my doctor told me exactly what I knew was coming. It was time to say goodbye. Like, this is not an abortion. This is basically, they tried everything they could to save her and the kid, and then it was just, well, unfortunately, we can't. And, like, the way that she's describing, like, the partial placental rupture, that's not something that you see coming. So, I don't know, like, I think that it's much more likely that she's adding this whole part where the doctors told her, oh, this baby has no chance of living, it's just best to abort. Whereas what actually happened is that she went into the hospital for this partial placental rupture. They tried to give her blood transfusion after blood transfusion after blood transfusion. And the bleeding kept coming. And then they're like, okay, well, we have no choice. Like, the baby is likely dead anyway, so we have to remove your child.
Yeah. And that is an abortion.
Well, yes.
I mean, okay,
it's the technicality, but it's not in the spirit of what a normal abortion is.
Well, I think it's important to be very clear because this is what the abortion, pro-abortion, activists are doing in the States. They're trying to blur the lines between an abortion and a miscarriage to try to scare people into thinking oh, when they ban abortion, you're not going to be allowed to have a miscarriage. And it's like, no, it's not. I mean, really, it's not that hard. An abortion is an intentional action taken by a doctor or some healthcare professional to try to basically remove, basically an action that results directly. Their action directly results in the death of the baby inside. Now, there are absolutely times when an abortion is absolutely justified. Like, for example, when a mother, for example, when they have to do what do you call that? When the baby implants somewhere in the wrong place.
The
ectopic pregnancy.
Yeah, ectopic pregnancy.
Ectopic. Okay, that's absolutely like vital, and that's
No,
absolutely understandable.
no,
The baby
and
has
of course,
full
like
survival. Yeah.
none of the laws which have been passed in various places across the states, no law is going to outlaw any of these procedures.
No. This is not in any way. I don't even think that she should feel ashamed.
No,
In any way about
well,
this.
I don't think she's feeling. It's more of like I'm shouting my abortion because that's what it was.
It was to brag that it's
this
abortion.
is something that they want to like. She's intentionally trying to say this is something that they want to ban, and like I have to shout this out to remind you that this is what they want to keep you from having. And it's like, no, you are lying to push a false narrative.
Yeah.
And this is it's not in the spirit of what an abortion is. An elective abortion is the deliberate killing and expelling of the child's remains from the uterus.
Well, you have to remember, an abortion is where somebody takes an action that directly or indirectly results in the death of the baby.
Yes.
When I say directly or indirectly, I mean, like, obviously in the most traditional abortions, they directly do kill the baby by like tearing it apart. But there are also ways of indirectly killing the baby, like poisoning it, like Plan B, was it Plan B pill, which indirectly results in the death of an already existing life and all that, and things like that. Whereas a miscarriage is you did nothing, you like no action of yours resulted in the death, unexpected death of the baby. Like it's a spontaneous death that you couldn't account for.
Yeah.
What happened with her? It wasn't a miscarriage. This baby didn't die because of a lack of intervention. This baby died because the intervention taken to save her life ended up like causing the death of the baby. Now, whether they went in there to kill the baby first and then
I think what probably happened is that they had to do an emergency surgery.
Sure.
And they probably had to temporarily remove her womb and then start fresh.
Basically, whatever actions they took to try to basically save her life, resulted in the death of the baby. And anybody who is a pro-life activist to any degree understands that this is an absolutely totally acceptable place. But here's the problem: it's not so much that it's fine that in order to save the mother that you ended up having to cause the death of the child. That's totally moral and understandable. Even if you're going. Even the scenario where the baby might not survive until they're born, but you want to kill them anyways. That gets a little more hazy morally because a lot of people do that. They're like, oh, they're gonna die very quickly because they have their heart isn't developed properly, their brain has problems, and that's okay.
Well, those are more iffy, mainly because of the insanely high rate of false reporting in these. I believe last time I checked, it was a 23% falsehood.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, when they say, oh, your baby is it has this defect, it has this problem, it's best to just abort because they're not going to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Nope. Do not this is not a justification simply because the falsehood rate and all they're trying to do is drum up profits.
Yeah, it's we're living in a culture of death.
Yep.
And to a lot of these people, they believe the more compassionate option is just kill whatever's there because it's worse for you to have to suffer through the difficulties of raising a child that's has some defect or something like that, which delves very dangerously.
Even nowadays, they're
eugenics.
well, it's better to live a free and unburdened life. There was, of course, the Twitter post by, what's his face? That's David Hogg.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I'd rather have a Porsche and a puppy than a baby.
Yeah.
And it's this is the testament to the selfishness and narcissism of our culture.
Well, there was even that one post by, I think that lady from The View, where she said that oh, I have members of my family that are mentally ill or have this or that. They struggle, and it's a struggle, and it's difficult for everyone to be able to support them. And she's like, it would have been better for them if they had died rather than lived. And everyone kind of like, rightfully so, gave her a really hard backlash because she's basically saying you'd be better off dead.
Yeah.
And they don't see that. They don't see that that's the justification. So ultimately, like what this all shows is it shows first of all, like with Stacey Abrams, it shows that the left has no problem using all sorts of mistruths and deceptive kind of ways. Like the very things that they always accuse everyone on the right of doing, they do themselves, of trying to basically like, drum up controversy, create like mistruths, misinformation, and all that kind of stuff to try to fool and scare people into buying their lies about like abortion. And then secondly, you have people that want to basically normalize abortion to such a degree that they want to basically say like, oh, abortion's good because they saved my life. And it's like, therefore all abortion's good. Like, there's a lot of subtle messaging. And you have to be really on top in order to be able to kind of get this stuff. So just beware. There's been a really large increase in a lot of deceptive and oftentimes very misleading talking points by a lot of people on the left when it comes to abortion. So just be on the lookout. It's something that you're going to see a lot of. So, yeah.
Yep.
That's it.
All right. Yeah, I was just checking something. But
Gets
now
distracted.